The scream cut through the night, like glass shattering in the dark. Emily's chest tightened, as if her breath had been stolen, and her trembling hands gripped the edge of the desk. Her eyes darted to the glowing monitor where a cruel message flashed. "You will never be more than invisible." The words burned deep into the walls of her mind. She whispered, "Why now? Why again?" The silence of the room weighed heavy, filled only with the hum of the fluorescent light above her. Her heart pounded, echoing louder than the cruel words replaying inside her. Emily had grown used to being dismissed, but tonight the sting cut sharper, like someone had torn open an old scar. Her father's old warnings echoed, "Keep your head down, survive quietly." Yet every part of her wanted to scream back. The reflection in the glass window stared at her, a woman tired of shadows, trapped between despair and defiance. She pressed her palms against her face, tears threatening but refusing to fall, until she finally whispered into the silence, "I am not invisible." The morning came too soon, pale light spilling across the cluttered room, as Emily dragged herself from bed. She stared into the mirror, dark circles like bruises beneath her eyes. "Another day," she muttered. The reflection held no promise, only weariness that clung to her shoulders. She tied her hair back, slipping into the same wrinkled blouse she wore too often. At the bus stop, cold wind gnawed at her skin while the world rushed past without noticing. She wondered if anyone ever truly saw her. A man brushed past roughly, not even glancing back. She whispered, "Invisible, right?" The phrase stung again, the echo of last night refusing to fade. The bus hissed to a stop, doors opening with mechanical indifference, and she stepped inside, her figure swallowed by strangers staring blankly at their phones. Emily sat stiffly on the bus, the vibration of the engine rattling through her seat. Conversations buzzed around her, fragments of laughter and gossip, yet none reached her. She held her worn leather bag close, her knuckles white. A child across the aisle laughed at something his mother whispered, and Emily felt the sharp contrast of warmth she had not felt in years. She looked down at her hands, rough from work, and sighed. "You don't belong anywhere," she thought bitterly. The city rolled past in streaks of gray and steel, her reflection in the bus window pale and unremarkable. She whispered under her breath, "Someday, I'll find my voice." No one turned. The office was already humming when Emily arrived, rows of monitors glowing beneath harsh fluorescent lights. She slid quietly into her chair, her presence unnoticed as usual. Colleagues laughed nearby, sharing jokes, the sound sharp against her silence. She opened her emails, heart sinking at the sight of a rejection notice. "Not qualified," it read. She bit her lip hard, willing herself not to crumble. Her colleague David walked past, his glance brief but sharp. He muttered, "You can't keep hiding forever." She stiffened, unsure if he meant it as advice or mockery. Her pulse quickened, her cheeks flushed. The words struck deeper than she wanted to admit. Emily's fingers hovered over the keyboard, her eyes blurring as tears threatened again. She clenched her jaw, whispering, "Not today." Around her the office buzzed with idle chatter, the sound pressing in like a cage. Her rejection email stayed open, mocking her, a cruel mirror of every past failure. She closed her eyes briefly, breathing deep, and tried to steady herself. David's voice replayed in her head, sharp and insistent. "You can't keep hiding forever." She wanted to scream back, to tell him he didn't understand, but the words lodged in her throat. She exhaled shakily and forced herself to type, her hands trembling, her heart demanding more than silence. Emily walked into the office kitchen, the smell of burnt coffee heavy in the air. She clutched her mug, pretending to be busy. Around her, laughter erupted from a small group near the counter. They spoke freely, their voices filling the room, but none turned toward her. She stirred her cup, though it was already empty. David leaned against the doorway, watching her quietly. He said, "You look like you're about to vanish." She shot him a glance, unsure if it was sarcasm or concern. Her lips pressed thin. She whispered, "Maybe that's easier." He raised a brow, unimpressed, before turning back into the hall. The sound of his footsteps faded, leaving her with the silence again. She exhaled, shoulders heavy, wishing for once she had the courage to answer back. Emily sat at her desk, typing lines she barely understood. Her mind wandered back to David's words. "About to vanish," she repeated under her breath, the phrase cutting sharper than he likely intended. Around her, colleagues chatted over weekend plans, their voices blurring together like static. She stared at her screen, eyes burning. A document error popped up, cruelly timed, and she groaned. David's voice cut across the desks, calm but blunt. "Fix it properly, or you'll be chasing the same mistakes all day." Her cheeks burned, half in shame, half in anger. She muttered, "Maybe I don't need your advice." But her voice was too low for him to hear. Her hands shook as she tried again, pushing herself not to give up. The cafeteria was loud, every table alive with chatter. Emily carried her tray carefully, searching for an empty seat. She spotted a corner and slid down quickly, hoping not to be noticed. A group nearby erupted in laughter, the sound stabbing at her chest. She kept her eyes down, picking at her food. David dropped his tray opposite her, casual as if it meant nothing. She looked up, startled. He said, "You really enjoy disappearing, don't you?" She stiffened, replying softly, "Maybe it's safer." His expression softened for the first time, almost curious. "Or maybe it's just fear." Her fork froze midair. His words pressed harder than she expected, leaving her silent, questioning whether he was right. The afternoon dragged, every tick of the clock louder than the last. Emily sat staring at the half-finished report on her screen, her thoughts spiraling. David appeared again, this time leaning casually on the divider near her desk. He said, "You think hiding will protect you, but it only keeps you stuck." She shot him a glare, snapping, "Why do you care?" He smirked faintly, answering, "Because you're wasting potential." The words dug deep, unwelcome, yet strangely grounding. She turned back to her monitor, refusing to show how much it stung. Her jaw tightened as she typed again, every keystroke louder than before. Inside, though, the question burned. Was he right? Evening light spilled across the office as most workers packed up, but Emily remained at her desk. She rubbed her temples, exhaustion pressing heavy. The rejection email still lingered in her inbox, mocking her with every glance. David walked past again, this time slowing. He muttered, "You'll never find your strength if you keep whispering to yourself." She wanted to retort, but instead sighed. Her voice cracked quietly, "I don't know how." His footsteps paused before fading into the hallway. Alone again, Emily stared at her reflection in the darkened monitor. Her lips moved in silence as if practicing words she couldn't yet say aloud. The office around her grew quiet, only the sound of her own breath remaining. Rain hammered against the office windows as Emily stared at the email on her screen. A promotion had been announced, but her name was nowhere on the list. Her chest tightened as whispers filled the room, her colleagues congratulating one another. She pressed her lips together, a mix of anger and despair rising. David walked past, his voice low. "Did you really expect them to notice you when you keep hiding?" She turned sharply, heat rushing to her cheeks. "You don't know how hard I try." He stopped, his gaze steady, and said, "Trying quietly isn't the same as fighting." The words pierced deep, leaving her trembling between shame and fury. She wanted to scream, but instead lowered her eyes to the glowing screen, the rejection sinking like a stone. The rain followed her home, heavy boots splashing through puddles as she walked the cracked sidewalk. Emily clutched her bag close, the city lights harsh against the wet pavement. Her thoughts raced with David's words, each one echoing louder than the last. She muttered under her breath, "Fighting. What do you know about fighting?" Her shoulders slumped as strangers brushed past without notice, umbrellas shielding their worlds from hers. She thought of her father's voice again, urging silence, survival. For years she obeyed, but tonight it felt like a curse. A car sped past, water splashing up her legs. She stopped, soaked, staring at her reflection in the dark puddle. The woman looking back seemed small, tired, yet something burned faintly in her eyes. The next day, Emily found herself cornered during a team meeting. A mistake in her report had been highlighted on the projector, her name printed clearly at the top. Heat surged up her neck as colleagues exchanged looks. The manager sighed, saying, "This is careless work." Her chest hollowed, words trapped in her throat. David, seated across the table, studied her with unreadable eyes. She wanted to defend herself, to explain, but silence crushed her tongue. The room moved on quickly, her error left hanging like a scar. She clenched her fists beneath the table, nails biting into her palms. The humiliation burned deeper than any wound, leaving her pulse hammering in her ears, as she promised herself she would not break in front of them. Emily sat alone in the stairwell after the meeting, her back pressed to the cold concrete wall. She wrapped her arms around her knees, the weight of shame suffocating her. Tears pressed at her eyes, but refused to fall. David's footsteps echoed as he appeared on the landing, pausing when he saw her. He leaned against the railing, his tone sharp. "If you're waiting for pity, you'll die waiting." She glared up, her voice breaking. "Why do you keep pushing me?" He shrugged, his expression unflinching. "Because you need it." His words struck like a hammer, cruel yet true. She turned her face away, heart heavy, knowing somewhere inside she wanted to believe him. The silence between them was heavier than words. That night, Emily lay awake staring at the ceiling, the city hum muffled outside her window. Shame and anger warred inside her chest, replaying every failure in merciless loops. She whispered, "Invisible, invisible," until the word lost meaning. David's voice returned in her mind, harsh but unyielding. Trying quietly isn't the same as fighting. Her throat tightened, the truth of it pressing deep. She sat up suddenly, heart racing, as if daring herself to finally speak. But she opened her mouth. Silence came again. She buried her face in her hands, frustrated tears spilling at last. Yet beneath the despair, a fragile spark remained, whispering that maybe, just maybe, he was right. Emily arrived early, the office nearly empty, the silence thick as she opened a folder left on her desk. Inside were documents she had never seen, detailing decisions made behind closed doors, projects she had worked tirelessly on but credited to others. Her name was missing, erased as if she had never existed. Her stomach twisted, fury and disbelief colliding in her chest. She whispered, "They stole it from me." The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, indifferent. David appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. She looked up sharply, eyes burning. "Did you know?" He crossed his arms, his voice blunt as ever. "I warned you, silence has a price." Her jaw tightened as tears pricked. But instead of crumbling, something inside her steadied. She exhaled slowly, words trembling on her lips. "Not anymore?" Emily sat in the restroom stall, clutching the folder against her knees. The truth gnawed at her ribs, years of effort erased by careless cruelty. She wanted to scream, but the walls would only echo back. Her breath came shallow, her reflection in the small mirror across the room catching her eye. For the first time she saw not just exhaustion but a quiet fire in her gaze. She whispered, "No one steals my voice." The words felt foreign, but powerful. Her hands steadied as she pressed them flat against the folder. The weight of silence had chained her long enough, and now her pulse quickened not with fear, but with the possibility of resistance. She straightened, jaw set, ready to face them. The meeting room buzzed as managers gathered, papers shuffling. Emily entered, folder in hand, her steps heavy but determined. Heads turned briefly before dismissing her presence as always. She laid the folder on the table, her voice quiet but sharp. "These are mine. You signed your names but I built them." Laughter rippled, mocking at first, but she didn't waver. Her chest ached, but the words spilled with clarity she had never known. One manager scoffed, "That's a bold claim." David sat in the corner, silent, his eyes fixed on her, not with mockery but with approval unspoken. For the first time, Emily didn't shrink. Her voice rose. shaking but strong. "Erase me again, and you'll regret it." Silence fell, and in it, she stood taller. Whispers spread quickly after the meeting, the office air tense and charged. Emily walked back to her desk, her body trembling, but her heart beat like a drum of victory. For the first time, people looked at her, not through her, but at her. Their expressions ranged from surprise to irritation. She sat down, her palms damp, whispering to herself, "You spoke." The words tasted new and strange, but powerful. David passed her desk, muttering just loud enough, "Finally." She glanced up, meeting his eyes, seeing a flicker of respect. Her chest lifted with a strange warmth, though fear still lingered. She realized the fight was only beginning, but she had already broken her silence, and nothing would be the same again. That night, Emily sat on her balcony, the city humming below. The cool air brushed her face as she closed her eyes, remembering the words she had spoken. They had trembled, they had cut, but they had been hers. For the first time in years her voice had filled a room. She whispered into the night, "I am not invisible anymore." The phrase no longer felt fragile, it was a vow. Lights flickered in the buildings around her, strangers living their own silent battles. She breathed deeply, her chest rising with something that felt close to freedom. The fear still lingered, but it was smaller now, shrinking against the fire she had uncovered. Tomorrow would bring more conflict. But tonight she owned her truth. Morning light filled the office brighter than usual, but tension clung thick in the air. Emily opened her inbox, expecting silence, only to find an anonymous message waiting. "You shouldn't have spoken. You'll regret it." Her blood ran cold as her pulse quickened. She glanced around, but everyone typed, laughed, carried on as if nothing was wrong. Her throat tightened, panic rising. Someone had noticed, and someone wanted her silenced again. David appeared, leaning on her desk. She closed the screen quickly, but his eyes caught the flicker of fear. "What now?" he asked. She swallowed, whispering, "I think I've started a war." His lips pressed into a line, his voice calm but sharp. "Then stop hiding, you're already in it." Emily sat in the stairwell again, the glow of her phone screen illuminating the threatening message. She reread it, her breath shallow. Fear clawed at her, but anger followed, sharper this time. David appeared at the top of the stairs, watching silently. She looked up, her voice cracking. "They want me silent again." He descended slowly, each step echoing. "So prove you won't be." She shook her head, whispering, "I don't know if I can fight them all." His tone cut firm, "You're not fighting them, you're fighting yourself." The words landed heavy, sparking something deep inside her. Her jaw clenched, resolve trembling into place. She realized he was right. The enemy had always been her silence. The office break room filled with chatter, but Emily stood before the corkboard, staring at project credits. Her name was absent again, erased as if her work never existed. Her hands curled into fists, breath sharp. David entered, his tone flat but daring. "Say something, right now." She turned, shaking her head, but his gaze was unrelenting. Fear churned, but anger boiled hotter. She turned back to the group, voice rising. "That was my work. My name belongs here." Silence fell, heads turning, eyes wide with shock. Her pulse thundered, but she stood her ground, chest rising steady. For the first time, no one interrupted her. The words had landed, undeniable. Whispers followed her out of the break room, coworkers buzzing like hornets, but Emily walked tall, her steps firmer than ever. The fear still lingered, but it no longer defined her. She replayed the words she had spoken, each one a spark fueling something brighter inside. David caught up beside her, his tone sharp but approving. "See? You don't vanish when you fight." She turned to him, a faint smile tugging at her lips, the first in what felt like years. "It feels terrifying," she admitted, "but alive." His gaze softened briefly before turning ahead. "Keep going," he said. The world still bristled with threats, but Emily realized she had found something stronger than fear, her own voice. That evening, Emily left the building as dusk settled, the city alive with flickering lights. She paused on the steps, inhaling deeply, her chest lighter despite the storm waiting ahead. She whispered, "I can fight." The words no longer felt like hope. They felt like truth. David stood by the entrance, arms crossed, watching. Their eyes met briefly, no words exchanged, but respect hung unspoken. She turned toward the crowded street, her steps steady. For the first time the noise didn't drown her. It moved around her, part of her world, not above it. The fear had not vanished, but it no longer controlled her. She had begun to claim her place. And the war, though far from over, would be fought on her terms. The boardroom was tense, every seat filled, papers stacked high. Emily stood at the front, her heart pounding like a war drum. She had prepared all night, the evidence stacked neatly in her folder, her voice rehearsed in silence. But now, every eye pierced through her like blades. The senior manager cleared his throat, dismissive. "We don't have time for baseless claims." Her fingers trembled, but she forced them steady, opening the folder. Not baseless, stolen. Gasps rippled as documents were revealed, proof undeniable. Her throat tightened, fear battling resolve, but her words grew louder. "You erased me once, never again." The silence thickened, broken only by the scrape of chairs. Her voice no longer wavered. This was her stand. The manager's voice thundered across the table, defensive. "You're making accusations that could cost you everything." Emily's knees shook, but she pressed forward, her voice sharp. "It already cost me years of silence." The words hit the room like stone against glass. For a heartbeat, she expected laughter, dismissal. Instead, a heavy quiet lingered. David leaned forward, his voice low but cutting. "She's right." Emily turned toward him, shocked. His eyes met hers, blunt but unwavering, lending strength without asking. She breathed deep, shoulders squaring. "Erase me again, and the truth will be louder than your lies." The fear had not left, but it no longer mattered. What mattered was standing. The confrontation escalated, voices overlapping. Emily stood taller, refusing to back down. Every insult hurled her way struck hard, but her words struck harder. She felt her pulse steady, her voice growing stronger with each sentence. "You built this company on the backs of silence. I won't be part of that anymore." The managers shifted uneasily, their certainty faltering. For once, she felt them hesitate. David's smirk was almost invisible, but it was there, the smallest signal of acknowledgement. Emily's chest lifted, her voice carrying weight it had never carried before. She realized she was no longer begging for recognition. She was demanding justice. The final blow came when Emily held up proof of her erased work, undeniable and raw. The room stilled, silence wrapping every corner. The manager clenched his jaw, defeated. Emily's hands no longer shook. They were steady, holding truth like a weapon. "You tried to erase me," she said, voice steady as steel. "But I'm still here." For a moment, her body trembled with the weight of what she had just done. Then she saw it, the flicker of respect, even fear in their eyes. It wasn't victory yet, but it was no longer loss. For the first time she had forced the world to see her. When the meeting ended, Emily walked out with her chest lifted. The battle wasn't won, but the ground had shifted. For the first time, people parted as she passed, eyes following her not with dismissal, but with recognition. Her body trembled with adrenaline, but her steps were firm. David caught up, his voice blunt but different now. "That's the woman I knew was in there." She glanced at him, breath catching, then whispered, "I didn't know she existed." He smirked, "Now you do." The hallway was the same as always, fluorescent and dull, but to Emily it glowed with possibility. The silence she had lived in was gone. She had spoken, and the world had heard. That evening, Emily sat alone at her kitchen table, the glow of the lamp warm against the cluttered space. She ran her fingers over the documents, no longer symbols of betrayal, but proof of her fight. She whispered, "You can't erase me." The words no longer shook, they carried weight. For years she had chased belonging, waited for permission, begged silently to be seen. Tonight, she realized she had given herself what no one else would: a voice. Tears slid down her cheeks, not of shame, but release. The chains of invisibility had broken. She breathed deep, whispering, "This is the start." Emily walked through the city streets the next morning, the sky painted gold by sunrise. Strangers rushed past, voices buzzing, but she no longer felt swallowed. Her steps were steady, her eyes forward. She had always walked small, shrinking from notice. Now, though, her shoulders straightened, her stride wider. She caught her reflection in a shop window, not a ghost, but a woman alive with fire. She whispered softly to herself, "You are here." The words felt like a promise etched into her bones. For the first time, she wasn't hiding. She was living. At the office, whispers still lingered, but Emily no longer cared. She walked to her desk, sat tall, and began her work. David stopped by, leaning against her divider as always. His tone was blunt, but softer. "You're different." She met his eyes, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "I finally found her." He nodded once, approval hidden but present. The noise of the office carried on, but for the first time it didn't drown her. She belonged, not because they granted her space, but because she claimed it. That evening, Emily returned to the balcony, the city alive below. The hum of traffic blended with her steady breathing. She had not conquered everything, but she had conquered herself. She whispered into the night, "No more silence." The phrase carried not as a plea, but as a vow. She closed her eyes, imagining others like her, still lost in shadows, waiting for their moment. "If I can, they can," she thought. The fire in her chest grew brighter. She no longer needed to be unseen. She was ready to live, speak, and stand. The final moment came the next day. As Emily walked into the office, a colleague hesitated, then nodded at her. A small gesture, but acknowledgement at last. She didn't need applause, she didn't need validation. She had her own voice now. She sat at her desk, whispering a single line to herself, one that carried every scar, every fight, every victory. "I am not invisible." The words landed softly, but they shook her world. A silence followed, not heavy anymore, but filled with strength. It was the silence of peace, of someone who had finally reclaimed her place.